Well, what's going on with the DCU and the canon status of every project moving forward? The water keeps on getting muddied, and fans are pretty confused by some of James Gunn's seemingly contradictory statements. So let's take a couple minutes to talk about what's going on, who's to blame, and why ultimately it probably won't matter. Now, before we do that though, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and ring that bell for all the updates. We do daily Marvel and DC videos, and we want to be your place for all the superhero news, but we're going to do it truthfully and transparently, so you are really in the know. Well, are you confused yet? Because a lot of people are. You know, the other day we did a video on James Gunn talking about the canonical status of Peacemaker, and he made the statement that Season 1 wasn't canon. This drove people to asking tons of questions, and now he seems to have rolled that back just a little bit, creating way more confusion. Now, to be fair, continuity in storytelling, especially in a huge cinematic universe, can be tough to keep up and running. Marvel Studios has even failed to sync up some projects properly moving forward, like Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness not referencing No Way Home, and the Marvels ignoring Secret Invasion. But for James Gunn's new DCU, this is awfully confusing before the first project has ever hit the shelves. Many fans are starting to get a little concerned about what's going on, and I think everybody should take a deep breath, kind of listen to what he's saying, and realize this is probably not his doing. Now, things got a little more confusing earlier today when James Gunn backed up a little bit the statement that Peacemaker Season 1 wasn't canon, and he came back and said all of the events didn't happen in the DCU, but most did, going on to say that a few things are outside the lines, so he can't say it's pure canon. Now, this should be pretty obvious to everybody what he's talking about, and honestly, I don't think Gunn is the villain here. Now, the primary things that are, quote, outside the lines are probably the references to the Justice League. At the end of the show, the Justice League made an appearance, and it really got fans pretty excited for the return of the core four characters, and with the follow-up of Henry Cavill showing up in Black Adam, well, it seemed like they were headed in a different direction. Now, clearly, that's not happening now, and for the most part, a lot of these core characters will be recast in the very near future. So what is really going on, and why can't James Gunn get his story straight? Well, I don't think this is his fault, and we need to roll back the clock a little bit. James Gunn runs DC Studios, and DC Studios is part of Warner Brothers Pictures, and that's why we have so many problems. Warner Brothers is well known for meddling. Matter of fact, they are notorious for ruining movies in post-production and creating something that the director really wasn't envisioning. Just ask David Ayer. Now, I think the big problem here is James Gunn is trying to establish his world within his constraints, but he still works for Warner Brothers and is picking up the pieces they made him pick up. Part of picking that up was to try to carry the old universe forward as long as he could to still try to make some money off of those existing movies, almost all of which failed. And now, as he's trying to realign the continuity to his story, well, it's becoming a lot harder. Now, this isn't Gunn's fault. It's him working with the pieces that he has in place now. But I absolutely do think he needs to come out with some kind of conclusive statement or simply stop talking about it. Comic book fans understand this pretty easy, and they've seen stuff retconned and ignored for decades. But movie fans are growing increasingly confused, and I think it could ultimately hurt the new DCU or sort of present it as a big mess before it even drops the first project. The real villain here probably is Warner Brothers Pictures. Nobody likes David Zaslav at this point as a general rule, and many of the things that have been forced into projects seemingly were totally forced by Warner Brothers and a serious lack of leadership there. I'm willing to bet almost any amount of money that Justice League appearance in Peacemaker was organized by the up-aboves. Gunn was probably forced to put it into the show, and people were counting on the return of those characters at that time before Gunn ultimately took over the whole studio and flushed the whole thing. Now, he's been pretty clear for his projects moving forward. The only thing that's in continuity is starting with Creature Commandos, and then everything that DC Studios does from there moving forward will be part of the overall story. It's pretty clear also, he's going to cherry pick previous projects to pick what he wants, and I kind of feel like this is a play out of Kevin Feige's book. As many of you know, Feige's been super hesitant to include anything in the official MCU that he wasn't a producer on. This is why things like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Daredevil have always had this sort of muddied status about where they fit into the timeline. Kevin Feige only plays with Kevin Feige's toys. And I think that level of control is exactly what James Gunn is trying to do at DC Studios, all while wrestling with Warner Brothers, who's probably the big villain here, for as much autonomy as possible. Now, should Superman Legacy do really well, I have to say Warner Brothers will probably be a bit hands-off, at least as long as Warner Brothers is involved. That's a whole nother story. But I think people should keep this in perspective moving forward, because I don't think Gunn has had a lot of control over what pieces were put on the board. He's just using what he has and trying to get everything aligned so he can move forward into this new phase. Quite honestly, at the end of the day, it probably won't matter that much. New projects dominate conversation, and when you draw some lines in the sand and retcon things, if it's done well, nobody cares. So moving forward, I think Gunn is going to address these issues. He said multiple times the new season of Peacemaker will address the timeline issues, so I think we get a definitive answer to that. And once Creature Commandos kicks off, the old DCEU won't matter but to a small segment of fans, and the general public is going to be talking about what's new, not what's already happened. Obviously, Gunn needs to wrangle this in and make sure he has control of the narrative, but I think people are blowing it way out of proportion and probably shouldn't worry too much about the DCU timeline moving forward. But we'll have to wait and see.